Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Rage's episode 63. We have a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about some news, first of all, and we're going to move the esports section to the front because later, after that, we're going to be going through all the cards. Just right before we're recording this, the final reveal stream happened, and we got all the cards like right at the last minute. So with some of them, I think we haven't even necessarily had much of a chance to look at them, but we're going to be just talking mostly about the new cards and our impressions so far and impressions about the classes. But we're not going to go too in depth. We're not going to rate every card. We're not going to do that yet because we're going to have separate videos on the same YouTube channel that Magma Rages is on. So make sure you subscribe there. We're going to have videos for all the classes with some deck lists, really condense those videos down to as short as possible, ratings for the cards, and some deck lists that you can try out on day one. So make sure you check those out. But first off, Pandemonia, let's kick into some news. So the big change that we didn't quite cover last week, I think it was some changes to how the copy mechanics are going to be working in Hearthstone. So alongside a couple other things as well, actually. But first off, if we look at just the first thing was a couple more updates to like the card types for some minions. So Ghostly Charger, basically changing from a beast to not a beast in order to fit with their whole spectral things aren't beasts. Just a consistency update, doesn't really have any balance impact. Ixalit going from an elemental to a non-elemental. There's like slight, shaman cards where you get random elementals that this has like the slimmest effect on, but ultimately pretty low effect. Not really
because he's a plant. He's not it comes down to he's a plant more than an elemental.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a couple cards that kind of fit that are breaking their consistency, that they're keeping on purpose, like Kindly Grandmother. Even though it looks like a Worgen, they're saying it's not a Worgen, but they just want to make sure that the art in future will be clear that it's not a Worgen. And obviously they want it to remain a beast for balance purposes as well, because of the beast synergy in Hunter. Arcane Giant and Arcane Golem, they're keeping as non-elementals because all the other kind of arcane creatures are not considered elementals, even though they're kind of like golems, some of the other giants and that have been, made into elementals now. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they basically just don't.
Just lore debate.
For lore reasons. I mean, you can go read the post for the full details. The post will be linked in the description. And then Bog Shaper is actually staying as an elemental because of balance reasons, basically staying in the because of the elemental synergies that exist in Shaman. So Bog Shape is the 7 mana 4/8. Whenever you play a spell, you draw a minion, I believe, from your deck, right? So that card still has synergies in like something like Shadowwalk Shaman, where you might want to get it specifically with something like Sandbinder. There are reasons for it to still be an elemental for balance reasons, so they're keeping that. Okay, and then the main bulk of this changes that are going to be happening in this 12.0 update are copy changes. So this update will be live when the update for Boomsday happens. Basically, I think 12.0 is actually going to be the same one that includes Boomsday. I'm guessing based on their versioning. Like usually when you have a major version like this, it's because of like new content and stuff. So I'm guessing that means we're actually going to get this when they preload the Boomsday cards, which should be soon.
Which it looks like this Friday, based on their scheduled maintenance announcement.
Maybe.
I'm not sure if that is it or not, but
maybe. I don't know if that's necessarily related, but anyway. So now, previously, a lot of the cards, when you copied them, and they had like buffs on them. So if you copied them from your opponent's hand or from your opponent's deck, and they had buffs on them, they wouldn't retain those buffs. But this is kind of changing now. So this impacts a lot of classes like Priest mostly. I mean, Priest has a lot of effects that steal cards from your opponent's deck. And now if you're stealing those cards, they will be buffed. So cards that have been buffed by Prince Keleseth, cards like Kingsbane, that's been buffed by all the kind of spells and stuff that has buffed it during the game. So that's pretty important. So basically now if you copy a card from anywhere, it's going to retain its enchantments, they're calling it, right?
Yeah.
So
except when it moves backwards in a zone. So like you can read the full post, but for the most part, what the average person needs to know is that when you're copying it, whether it's from the hand or the deck, and you get in a copy, you're going to get a copy of the buffs. So that's like the general what you need to know.
Yeah. And also, if you copy it from hand to play. So most of these have to do with it coming to your hand. Or deck to deck, like Archbishop Benedictus. And then also if you're copying it from in play, like Molten Reflection, it keeps buffs. And then the other one that's kind of interesting is if you're copying it from hand to play. There's not a lot of cards that do that. We see Eureka was one of the new cards that's going to be doing that, as well as Cobalt Illusionist, which is one of the rogue 4/3 4-mana 3/3 with Death Rattle to copy, or summons a 1/1 copy of a minion from your hand. But now it's going to be keeping buffs as well. So I think like if it's, let's say, a minion that was buffed by Keleseth, I think it'll probably come down as a 2/2, for instance. You know, that kind of thing. I think mostly it has impact in the Quest Priest deck. You're going to be getting, on average, stronger cards. You know, if you're playing up against a deck that plays Keleseth, then you'll actually be getting their buffed minions as well. And the one other interaction that's pretty interesting is with Azalina and Shadowwalk. So if you're copying your opponent's Shadowwalk from their hand, you're going to be getting that reduced Shadowwalk if they've played it. You know, if they've played their first Shadowwalk, bounce back the 1-mana one, you can get the reduced Shadowwalk there. And there is some slight combos you can do in Warrior specifically by playing Azalina and Life Drinker. As long as you're also playing Blood Razor, I think it works. You can actually kind of counter OTK the Shadowwalk Shaman by using Bring It On as well. So you use Bring It On to reduce the Shadowwalks in their hand to 0. Then you play Azalina, and then you can just play the Shadowwalks. And as long as you've played Blood Razor, you'll get the Battle Cry from that, which will kill off the Shadowwalks, so you have enough board space over time. And then obviously you need to also have like Life Drinker or some kind of card that damages your opponent in your deck in order to actually kill them. That's going to be a pretty...
it's a bit silly though.
It is a bit silly, but I'm just like, it is like you have to include Life Drinker or one of these other damage cards in your deck, and that's the big no-no. Actually, like as Control Warriors, playing Azalina is actually not that ridiculous. Everything else is actually something we've seen in some Control Warriors, but not the Life Drinker thing yet.
Life Drinker, yeah, but we'll see if it.
I mean, if you think of it as a 1-card tech inclusion, it's not that bad, right? To beat a matchup that's currently unwinnable.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on from that, we have some changes to Arena, which were announced just today as well.
Before that, the transform rule changes.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. The transform rule changes as well. That'll be coming part of the 12.0 patch. So this affects cards that transform at a point. So usually it's just in your hand. It like Shifter's Eris, Molten Blade, and Shifting Scroll. They're going to lose all their enchantments as they transform. So this used to be something we saw with like Emperor Thaurissan, where they got the cost reductions. There's a couple new cards as well that do have some kind of cost reductions like this, like the one Druid card we'll be talking about. And it's also most impactful, I think, with Primordial Glyph and Shifting Scroll. Primordial Glyph, Shifting Scroll used to be a pickable card from Primordial Glyph if the other two options weren't good enough, because at least in the future those spells would have been reduced, but now they're not going to be reduced anymore. So that's a bit of a nerf to Primordial Glyph, kind of.
And then on a similar transform, but not quite, is Voodoo Doll is changing as well.
Yeah. So do you want to explain the Voodoo Doll change?
So basically, if you transform or silence the minion that's been cursed by the Voodoo Doll, the curse will be, broken, and the minion will no longer be killed when Voodoo Doll dies. So so transforming it or silencing it. So like Hex, Polymorph, and we'll silence it with Spellbreaker. Will break the curse. Oh, and also obviously silencing the Voodoo Doll.
Yeah.
And then the
And-
final change, which is a nerf. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. Basically, just to fix up, it's just a wild nerf, really. They're nerfing Shadowboxer. So instead of, so Shadowboxer was a 2-mana 2/3 mech with, or whenever a character is healed, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So this kind of caused some possible infinite combos. You actually really just need to play Shadowboxer into the Elixir if you get lifesteal. So I mean, it's a 1 in 4 to get lifesteal on the Elixir. And then if you can attack with Shadowboxer when it has lifesteal, every time it does that 1 damage that procs from the first heal, then it will just keep dealing damage. It's kind of an infinite combo in that sense. So they're changing it to whenever a minion is healed, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So that stops the lifesteal infinite combo. You would have to find some other way to heal your minions all the time. So making it a little bit more similar to Northshire Cleric almost, to be based on when minions are healed rather than when characters are healed.
Sure.
So you will be getting full dust for Shadowboxer if you haven't already dusted it yet. If you, or you know, so that's a nice thing. So make sure when this goes live, if you don't dust your wild cards, to go back and dust those Shadowboxers.
Yeah.
And then so moving on to the arena changes. So these happened just before we were going live. In fact, we saw them even after all the cards because we were looking at those first. We have some of the... So previously, weapons and spells class... Well, those are both always only class cards. So they've been getting buffs in their appearance rate, but they're going to be... and how often they were offered, even with the bucket system as it is now. Those are going to be changed. So class cards are being changed from 100% to 50%, compared to like neutrals. And spells and weapons are going from extra 75% to 50%. And those spells and weapons bonus was on top of the existing class bonus actually as well, because it's stacked like that. So it's going to be a lot less weapons and spells, which is good if you want kind of more consistent minion combat in Arena. And then they're also changing a little bit how the rarity works for how often cards are offered. And there's a couple other nuances, but I think the most interesting thing about this is they actually have provided a full list of appearance rates for cards in a CSV format, as well as a full list of the card buckets. So for those who don't know, cards are kind of offered in buckets now, rather than just by rarity, which they used to be, except for legendaries, which are a little bit different. So now what's going to happen is, what happens is they're offered in like buckets based on power level. And now for the first time, they're actually providing us with the exact buckets that they're using, which is really good. It's really good, information for Blizzard to finally be giving. Kind of people have been able to figure it out based on like HS replay stats and stuff, but it's always a question of like, is this right? Can we exactly trust? Maybe some of the underpicked cards we're not 100% sure about, but now we actually know. For now, this is going to be a one-time thing. It's not something they're going to be actively updating. But in the future, maybe it kind of sets a precedent that they will give us the buckets, specifically like when a new expansion comes out. That's the really interesting time to know the buckets if you want to, predict and beat the meta. Because one of the best things you can do is pick a card that is not as powerful, a card that is more powerful than its bucket. So knowing when cards are better than a lot of the other cards offered around them is pretty useful. And also you can kind of manipulate the buckets to a certain extent, and you can kind of manipulate the algorithm. But this isn't really an arena-focused podcast, so I don't want to go too much in depth into that. There's one other card change that I thought was pretty interesting. Mind Control Tech is being promoted into a higher bucket, which means you're going to see it less, or it's going to be a more difficult choice. So it's going to be with more powerful cards. So that's that should have the effect of reducing the number of mind control techs in Arena, which is something that, Arena pros, I think, will be pretty happy about. And then onto our esports section. We're just going to move this up because we want to get through to all the cards next. there were two events actually happening this last weekend. We had HCT Tokyo. That was a tour stop where there was online qualifiers, so 16 people were taking part in that. Hinaya won, we don't actually know too much about at this point. Just a Japanese player, we're guessing at this point. The actual more interesting thing that really happened was Hunter Ace, who's been absolutely killing it at tour stops so far this year, made it through to the top 4. So that means he actually has enough points to be at 150 points already, which is the first level of masters, like a 1-star master, which is an incredible achievement. Like, I remember, last year when they announced all of this stuff, we were kind of like, no one's going to get there, not even to the first one, and everyone laughed it off. And we're only 2 of 4 seasons in a year down, and Hunter Ace is already at like 1-star master. I don't think it's unreasonable for him to get to 3-star master.
Nope, not at all. I mean, if he continues his form, he's been in top form.
Yeah.
And I think for someone who takes the game competitively, it's actually really good because it shows that skill plays it's kind of one of those things that reassures people that skill plays a big role in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
And because Hunter Ace is not just getting lucky. Sure, there's games where he gets lucky and not, but I mean, for you to do this well consistently, it's because you're good.
Yeah, and I mean, it highlights the kind of key thing in card games where it's not always about who wins the tournaments. It's about putting in consistent performances, right? He hasn't actually won that many. I think he's only won 1 or maybe 2 tour stops, but he's been top 8, top 4s, top 16 very, very often. And that's secured him a lot of points alongside, obviously, just really high ladder finishes as well. So, I mean, yeah, big props to Hunter Ace. For helping everyone that wants to take Hearthstone seriously make the argument that skill really matters. And then, of course, there was also Seat Story, which wasn't an HCT event, but is a really, really fun event. It's kind of a house cup that we have for Hearthstone, hosted by the Tech TV guys over in Germany. And it's really fun because you get a lot of the players on the couch, a lot of players that we barely ever see anymore, like Pavel, for instance. And it's really fun to see them cast and actually just hear them meme around and stuff a lot. So a lot of those VODs are really worthwhile going back to watch just for how funny they are. If you're into some high quality analysis whilst memeing at the same time. And in Seat Story, Ball Control managed to win it. A big win for him. I mean, that Seat Story is one of the most stacked tournaments you'll find because it's an invite tournament.
So
and
it's all good players there, Lee.
Yeah, and I mean, he beats out Casey in the final. So, well done to both of them for making it through. It's quite a grueling tournament with 2 group stages into the single elimination. So it is quite a grueling tournament, and it's obviously a really fun one to watch. One of my favorite tournaments to watch. And then there is also HTG going on. So we're into the 3rd round of the Swiss now, I believe. It's been going on pretty much from Tuesday every week with the community show happening on Monday, all on the Play Hearthstone channel. So make sure you check that out if you're interested in HTG. Unfortunately, no Africa in it. So I can say, honestly, I haven't been that invested in it.
Yeah. And also the problem is because it's like a global, the times have been all over the place. So
true. Some of them have been must have been at work and stuff like that, which is not helpful.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult. But I mean, if you just happen to be bored, check it out, and then sometimes you might just end up watching a game.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing the different formats and everything. But it is time to get to the thing everyone really cares about, and that is new cards. And we're going to be going through all the classes, and we're going to be starting off with Druid, of course. We've seen some of these cards already, like Forbiddenness Floop, which is the one I'm still most excited about. But the one other card that we got is the Legendary. This is Floop's Glorious Goop. I'm going to constantly say Goop instead of Gloop. But anyway, it's a 1-mana Druid spell. Whenever a minion dies this turn, gain 1 mana crystal this turn only. So these are full mana crystals. This is like a temporary ramp for this turn. Kind of like an innovate if you trade your board. Very different to Flibidinous Floop himself. A lot of the cards really seem like, a lot of the legendary spells seem like they're going in a very different direction to the scientists.
Yeah. And I think, in a bit of a way that's good, so it doesn't kind of, make the path for the class a bit too linear.
Yeah.
Which, the one class where there's exception, and we're going to get to later, I think it's probably Mage, where the spell kind of synergizes with the hero, with the scientist. But like you say.
Yeah, I mean, I think our first assumptions were that they would kind of synergize, that would be the point for like a story, lore purposes. But it makes sense actually from a balancing and kind of deck building perspective that they're different, because these are going to be two really powerful cards, or at least that's the plan for the class, and they kind of represent different archetypes. If you put all your eggs in a one basket archetype, either that archetype can be too powerful or it could be terrible, and the class then suffers as a whole for that expansion. So I think it's a smart decision to keep the classes all viable. And then, anything else you want to say? Sorry, about Floop's Glorious Gloop?
Well, just that, because it's about, trading, it definitely lends itself to a more aggressive sort of token-based strategy.
Yeah.
So I could easily see it just going into Token Druid.
Yeah.
You trade your entire board, and then you can refill, or you can buff, or you can do whatever.
Yeah, for me, it really helps with the turn after you play Living Mana. I see it having a lot of synergy with that. After you play Living Mana, they can sometimes just ignore your board and be like, I'm not going to give the person the mana for the next turn, and they can force you to make the trades. But now you'll always have at least one crystal, so you can play Floop's Glorious Gloop and then trade your treants, and you can at least still play something that turn, which is pretty powerful when your opponent's not necessarily expecting it. And then obviously there is the synergy with cards like Whispering Woods and cards like that can also give you just extra ramp turns to pull off really powerful board building kind of combos. I'm not sure that there's really going to be any like Malygos kind of combo deck combos like we might see with Flibidinous Floop.
Yeah, so like we say, different direction.
Yeah. And then we have Dream Petal Florist. This is one of the cards that's also newer that's come out since the last Magma Rages. Dream Petal Florist, 7 mana, 4/4 epic minion with, at the end of your turn, reduce the cost of a random minion in your hand by 7. So, what do you think of this, Pandemonium?
I think it's quite it's quite reminiscent of Emperor Thaurissan, but this is obviously a lot more restrictive in terms of it only a random minion, but also the discount is a lot. 7 is quite. So my first thought when I saw this is either Big Druid or Malygos Druid.
Yep.
And the main synergies also is with the other card we spoke about. I think we spoke about Juicy Sark Melon.
Yeah, we did.
And this kind of seems to be the 7 drop you might want to be fetching with it.
Yeah, I mean, when we spoke about Juicy Sark Melon, we said there weren't really any 7 drops that were worthwhile in these big decks, but Dream Petal Florist might well be that one, as you mentioned, and it gives you a good curve as well, especially because you're going to have other big cost minions in your hand. So playing the Dream Petal Florist first really sets up well for you to play one of those other big cost minions and still have a kind of be able to like make other players with some spells or something to go in that turn and still have good tempo. So I actually really like Dream Petal Florist. There's also a small synergy with like Dorian, Dollmaster Dorian, and Juicy Psych Melon, where if you cast Juicy Psych Melon with Dollmaster Dorian on the board, you'll get the 1/1 copies of those 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost minions. And then because you're getting the copy of the Dream Petal Florist, the reduction's still going to go off at the end of your turn. So you still get a reduction even that turn when you play it. But I'm not sure that combo is necessarily going to be one of the better ways to do it. But it is something. That maybe is good.
Any high value target in your hand is. I mean, this obviously with like Malygos, it could be quite silly.
Yeah, I mean The thing with this compared to Thaurissan is Thaurissan, you always knew what you were getting. It was always a 1 reduction on your whole hand, so you could better plan around that. Dream Petal Florist, you have to specifically set up your hand in a way that you will only have the 1 minion if you want to make it kind of predictable. And that's not always that easy, although a lot of the Druid decks, especially like Malygos Druid, do tend to run mostly spells. But let's say you have like Forbiddeness Floop and Malygos in your hand. That might be a bit tricky because you might not always want to reduce the Floop. You would maybe usually want to reduce the Malygos, because then playing Malygos and Floop, you have more mana. So, there's a little bit of more of a swing in the RNG there if it goes wrong for you as well. But you can play 2 of these as well to kind of mitigate that, if you have time to play 2 7-mana 4/4s. Obviously, this card is pretty terrible in tempo. Yeah.
Sure. It's quite a classic card, I think.
Yeah. Okay, and then moving on to some of the cards we saw today as well in the reveal stream. Tending Tauren. Tending Tauren is a 6-mana 3/4 with rare with choose one, give your other minions +1/+1, or summon 2/2/2 treants. So, mini scenarios, basically.
Pretty much many scenarios. The only difference being that those 2/2 treants don't have taunt, I believe.
Yep.
So it's a little bit worse in the fact that it doesn't stop like damage immediately. But I mean, either the buff. I mean, +1/+1 is not bad, but I think most of the times, summoning 2/2 treants. I mean, that's basically what? That's 7/8 of stats for 6 mana, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And it also has the synergies, as you spoke, some of the other cards, it has the treant synergy.
Yeah.
The Dendrologist and the Giant Lawnmower.
Yeah. It definitely has a lot of synergy with the treants. I'm not sure this card. This will be one of my lower priorities to run in the treant deck, I feel, but it definitely does seem like it's versatile as well, and that versatility has always proved well for Druid, right? Being able to give the +1/+1, I think, can actually be really good when you're going with this tokeny treant strategy as well. So it is also a card that you can ramp into, which is worth noting. Always worth noting with Druid that you can get to these higher mana cost creatures at an earlier stage in the game, which can be pretty relevant when they're very stats focused like this. And then next up we have Gloops. Oh wait, sorry, we've already been over Dendrologist and Gloop Sprayer. So I think that's actually everything.
I mean, it's all the Druid.
Yeah, that's everything from Druid. So overall, your feelings on Druid?
I think Druid's got a lot of good toys that different directions. So I still foresee Druid being quite high up the tier list. And actually still having probably multiple tier 1 decks. I think it's good. It will have 2, 3, maybe even more viable, strong decks.
I think Druid will be nerfed. I'm going to make the relatively bold claim that I feel like Druid is going to be nerfed in some way. Or at least it is looking right now like Warlock did pre-Witchwood. Right? It's got a bunch of tier 1 decks. They're not as oppressive as, let's say, Cubelock was going into Witchwood, but it's pretty powerful as a class, and it's getting tools to make it better. I mean, I think the combo decks might get more reliable. The big decks seem like they'll get better with the Dream Petal Florist and the Juicy Psych Melon. I'm not convinced people are going to want to play the Treant deck versus the other ones. But I actually think that deck might not be too bad, and maybe that's the token deck can just become that deck. Maybe that deck's good enough. But ultimately, I think Spreading Plague is still actually the card that would be the target for nerf. I think a lot of people still look at UI, but ultimately I actually think Spreading Plague, they need to nerf the minions themselves rather than the mana cost this time.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's the amount of stats you get for 6 mana, which is...
Yeah.
You get like 35 points of stats or like 20 points of stats. It's a bit silly.
Yeah, it's the effect it has on slowing down the game. It's so like hectic, the effect it has on slowing down the game, which is really powerful for the decks like Big Druid and Malygos Druid. And for something like a Token Druid, you get a really powerful big board generator that you can combine with your Soul of the Forest. So I think maybe weakening the size of the minions would help. I think that might be what it is, but it's going to be weird for them to do that if they don't change Morphurian too, right? Because it's Then you
Oh
get
yeah.
1-5 Scarab sometimes and not sometimes, and that's going to be weird.
Yeah, they'd have to change it as well. Be a bit weird.
Yeah. Okay, so Druid's looking pretty good. Yeah, looking like it's still going to be
Definitely up
strong. Okay, and then Hunter, there's quite a few new cards in this class because we hadn't seen a lot. We're going to be starting off with Flock's Boomzooka. This is the legendary spell. 8 mana, summon 3 minions from your deck. They attack enemy minions, then die. Honestly, the first thing I thought when I saw this was, did they just print Call of the Wild and like make it balanced by making it legendary? Because I had like reminiscent to 8 mana Call of the Wild, and then I read the card and I was like, that's not as good. Probably.
Not quite, yeah. So, summon, from what we saw in the reveal video, summon, like they get, they auto attack.
Yeah.
So, like, you don't even get to choose how to attack, and then they die. So, like, I think if your opponent doesn't have any minions, they will just die.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of like a board, like a bit of removal.
Yeah.
And it has the potential of being a combo enabler, like to add cards to your death rattle pool if that becomes relevant, if that's more relevant.
Yeah. I mean, if you have ways to resurrect cards, which is not really something that Hunter does, it can be relevant. Or if you pull cards that have good death rattles, it can be relevant, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could see this going into something like Egg Hunter or anything like that. It is at least 8 mana, which is like, I think at 9 mana it would be really bad. And that's because in the late game in a lot of Hunter decks, you are going to be in Deathstalker Rexar mode, and you still want to be able to hero power every turn. So if you were missing that hero power, it would be a massive cost. So I feel like that helps it a little bit, but ultimately, I'm not really convinced. I mean, there's no way you can get the minions to go face because first of all, you don't control them, as you said, so they die immediately. And I'm not really sure. I mean, Abominable Snowman or whatever, Abominable. Whatever. Bowman, that one.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. Like
that's the one resurrect mechanic, right? In Hunter.
Yeah, that's kind of I think the angle they're going for. We saw that in the reveal video.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced about this bad boy.
Yeah. And then Boommaster Flock we already spoke about. We have another Death Rattle Hunter Synergy card though, and that's Necromechanic. Necromechanic's a 5 mana 3/6 epic minion. Your Death Rattles trigger twice. This one seems pretty good. The 5-drop slot has always traditionally been something that Hunter's been a bit weak in. Even now with cubes in your Death Rattle Hunter, sometimes you want to hold them until turn 6. I see this as kind of like a Houndmaster Shore-ish effect, but not as strong. I think Houndmaster Shore is clearly stronger than this because you get more tempo on the back of it. But this could still be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, this with, any of the trigger death rattle effects is powerful. And like you say, it's got one of those ones that even though it doesn't have taunt written on it, I think you can honestly consider it to almost have taunt because when you play this, your opponent's going to want to deal with it very quickly because just the threat of what this card can enable you to do is, I think, scary enough.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious comparison is good old Baron Rivendare from Naxxramas,
sure.
But obviously with a more powerful body, 3/6 instead of a 1/7 and a little bit more mana. So, I mean, I think Necromechanic has some potential. I'm not really sure the Egg deck needs it, honestly. I'd struggle to fit this in the deck right now. But it's definitely something to test with, and maybe even more useful in the Recruit Hunter decks. Because if you play like Kathrina and play dead Kathrina or something, then the Necromechanic becomes dumb. Or if any of your charge minions, the Devil Saw or King Crush sticks, and you cube it, then you get a lot of damage as well. So I think that might be the actually slightly better deck for Necromechanic.
Yeah, and... it's not a beast though. That's just that's an interesting thing to know.
Yeah, I mean it's a goblin. It's the actual.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And speaking of goblins, we have Goblin Prank. Goblin Prank is a 2-mana epic hunter spell. Give a friendly minion +3/+3 and rush. It dies at end of turn. Seems like a Death Rattle kind of target card as well, right? Where you actually want to make use of the Death Rattle. You kind of 2-for-1 yourself a lot of the time, which is not good because you need to Well, you're going to spend 2 cards. You're going to play a minion or have with us with a minion on the board, give it extra stats, clear one of their minions, and then it's going to die. So your minions died, and you've used a card from your hand just to kill their minion. So I'm not that sure how good Goblin Prank is going to be for that reason.
The main leverage though is with the death rattle. So putting that on an egg. I mean, that's. I think that's kind of what you're going for. You don't want to just unless you really need to kill something badly, you play it, but you don't want to just kill. You don't just want to get a value trade in that dies anyway, right? That kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah. It's definitely like an egg activator, and I mean, as an egg activator, one of the nice things about activating eggs with things like Playdead and Terrascale Stalker is they actually stay on the board, which protects you against AoE, which is important in matchups like against control mages or any kind of control decks, honestly, where they want to AoE your board. So I think I'd still rather play Terrascale Stalker and the Playdead in that deck, but Goblin Prank is more tempo in the sense that you actually get to use that 3/3 immediately, even though you don't have the protection of the Death Rattle egg staying on the board, which sometimes can be a little bit bad as well because it clunks up the board. But anyway, Goblin Prank seems alright, probably not going to make the cut for that deck though. And then we have Bomb Toss, one of the other new cards. 2 mana, deal 2 damage, summon a 0/2 Goblin Bomb. So little Goblin Bombs seem to be a bit of a theme in this expansion. We first saw them with Boommaster Flark, and now there's actually quite a few cards. Hunter having this one as well. 2 mana, deal 2 damage. That's a bit meh. The bomb, you definitely have to be playing Magnetic Magnetic Hunter for this to work, right? I mean, that's the only reason you actually want the bomb on the board, I feel.
Yeah, because basically, if you don't do that, it's basically like. So, my brain just
No problem. I mean, with the big thing to remember with Goblin Bomb compared to the egg, and the big difference is that Goblin Bomb doesn't give you much reward for using activators like Playdead or Terrascale Stalker. It's just 2 damage. It doesn't give you a body which can do repeatable damage and control the board and allow you to snowball. That's always so much more valuable than something like Goblin Bomb, where you're just getting the damage. So I feel like it needs to be in a scenario where you actually want the mech on board so that you can use your magnetic mechs to better effect. And I mean, Bomb Toss can go face, so it suits an aggressive magnetic deck, right?
Yeah, it's most similar to On the Hunt. It's a card. It's an old. Is it still standard? The 1 mana 1/1. It deals 1 damage and summons 1/1 Mastiff. Obviously, that had the B synergy. This has got the bomb synergy. So we'll see if these goblin. I mean, in the reveal video, it became a bit of a joke because that got taunt, and it would have if Chuck had killed it, it would have killed himself.
Yeah, but that is a situation that I see happening very infrequently. Even then, Chucky was still able to win because the bombs just couldn't kill themselves off. Anyway, I think it's actually a lot weaker than On the Hunt because you still get to do something with that 1/1. You can actually attack with it. The 0/2 they can just ignore until you've actively find a way to use it. I mean, I think the best way to use it is honestly a lot of the time going to be rolling Leok. These Goblin Bombs are definitely making Leok a lot better out of Animal Companion. But next up, we have Venomizer. Venomizer is a 2 mana 2/2 mech with magnetic and poisonous. It's a common. This is pretty much exactly what we were looking for, right? Throughout all of this, magnetic stuff, what we've been constantly saying is we want 1-drop mechs, we want 2-drop mechs, and if we have good 1-drop mechs, we want good 2-drop mechs with magnetic so we can snowball them up. And that's exactly what Venomizer is. 2 mana 2/2 magnetic poisonous is alright. It's no shielded mini-bot. I'm not actually sure the poisonous is always that relevant. It's good against high health, low attack taunts. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Cards like Void Lord. But ultimately, even as just a 2/2 body, it's not the worst because it has, in a way, infinite attack if you play it without actually using the magnetic part, because it can actually kill whatever it attacks into.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we're saying, this is kind of like, the glue, the glue of a potential mech hunter deck. It's not the most exciting card. but it will be kind of a card that makes the deck playable, I think.
Yeah, you need to have ways to snowball the board early, and Venomize is going to make sure, or at least gives you a way to do that. And it's a decent enough 2-drop with the magnetic upside, basically.
Yep.
And then finally we have Secret Plan. Secret Plan, 1 mana one mana spell, discover a secret. I'm not that sold on this. I kind of thought about it for like Spell Hunter, but ultimately I feel like you'd rather have tracking most of the time to track into the Spellstone. It only matters where you actually might go to Fatigue and you care about that, but most of the time with Spell Hunter I don't think that's necessary, or if you actually want additional copies of the same secret, right?
Yeah, like that. I think that's probably the biggest. Like that's probably the biggest draw about any time where you can discover something. It means you can either discover something that's not in your deck. So, like you could, let's say in a certain matchup, you might want Rat Trap. You want one of the sort of the more niche spell, the secrets that you wouldn't normally run in your deck.
Yeah.
Or you get, the case, let's say against aggro, you get the third explosive trap, or the third freezing trap. That then your opponent, it makes your opponent's life a lot harder to play around when you discovered it instead of getting it from your deck.
Yeah, look, when your opponent is a hunter and they go past turn 1, play secret on turn 2, and I've played a minion on turn 1 or turn 2, the safe assumption a lot of the time is that is Wandering Monster right now. That's the best secret to play early on. But if they go Secret Plan into secret, you have no idea. Then maybe you're going to attack into the secret because there's a lower chance it's Wandering Monster. And then if it turns out to actually be Wandering Monster, they might get ahead. So, that like informational advantage helps a bit with Secret Plan. It makes your opponent's planning quite harder.
Exactly.
Which is, but ultimately, I'm not really sold on this. Like, I don't see it being amazing. It's not bad when you get it off like Rockdalaw, at least.
That's true. Yeah,
that's a serviceable use for Rockdalaw.
It's and if you get from Rockdalaw, it's almost like a wild card in a way.
Sure.
It's like
a card you can trade in for a better card.
Exactly.
Yeah. So overall, how are you feeling about Hunter?
So basically, mechs and Death Rattle are kind of the general theme. So I mean, we know Cube Hunter and Recruit Hunter are decks now.
Yeah.
So it looks like that a lot of them are only likely to get better, and we might see the emergence of sort of a mech, like a Death Rattle. Like I'm not sure if it will be Death Rattle mech, but like a mech Hunter deck looks like it might be possible.
Yeah, there's not a lot in Hunter that's convincing me that I should be playing Hunter for mechs versus anything else. I think Spider Bomb and Venomizer are decent. Fireworks tech, sure, if there's enough death rattles, but I don't really see the magnetic decks generally having enough death rattles to make fireworks tech that great.
Well, until we talk about the one coming later.
Sure. But ultimately, I think a Hunter does do that kind of snowball strategy quite well. And I mean, right now we have Egg Hunter, which isn't all that aggressive, and the Recruit Hunter, which is even slower. And those two decks I think might improve a little bit, although I don't see them using many of the cards from this expansion, but we'll have to wait and see. Overall, I think the legendaries are very disappointing, which keeps in style with Hunter.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe the mech deck will appear, but I'm thinking Paladin is looking a little bit better for the mech deck, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that a bit later. Pretty good cards there. Yeah, Hunter.
I think Hunter will be alright. Spell Hunter, I think, might still be on the fringes as well.
Yeah, but anyway, Hunter some form is looking good.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to with all of these classes, we're going to get to some actual deck lists and stuff once we have a chance to actually sit down and build some decks as well, and then we'll have a more solid idea. So make sure you check out those videos as well. And then moving on to Mage, I think Luna's Pocket Galaxy is also new. We haven't discussed that yet. Change the cost of minions in your deck to 1. This is the legendary spell that costs 7 mana. Obviously, the combos with this, Antonidas, if that's still in your deck, Sorcerer's Apprentices, Molten Reflection, Infinite Fireballs. I mean, we all know how it works from Quest Mage. This case with this is you just have to have them in your deck. or you have to play the Antonidas and then Baleful Banker it, and then not draw it that turn, and then play Luna's Galaxy the next turn.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it definitely lends itself to some sort of combo based. I mean, there is always the possibility of you just play this as, like, let's say, a value sort of card, and then you just play a bunch of big stuff that you then draw.
Yeah, either playing
you
it.
don't actually try to kill them in one turn.
Yeah, that's true. You can play it with big minions. I mean, reducing the cost of something like Dragoncaller or Alana is amazing if in like a big spell mage. It is actually pretty legit for big spell mage in that sense. Or reducing the cost of any of those minions is pretty good. It counts as a big spell to roll off your Dragon's Fury. And if you're playing like a big spell mage deck that's like a Spiteful Summoner type deck where you want to be a bit more aggressive with your minions as well, that's actually pretty good as well. Getting one cost minions. And if you're playing like Book of Spectres and Archmage Arugula, any of that kind of stuff that allows you to get to those resources more, that'll be pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, so this is like, it's a very interesting card. Like, it's a potential to be like absolutely broken, or like it ends up doing like very little.
Yeah, I'm pretty positive on this card actually. Just talking about these other kind of mage decks, making these minion mage decks work might be a thing, and it might even be okay in the current kind of control big spell mage decks if they run a few more big minions for extra like late game value. More like Syndragoses and those kind of things. And then what else do we have to talk about? Meteorologist, 6-mana 3/3, rare battlecry. For each card in your hand, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. I really don't like this card. I think you have to have like 6, 7 or more cards in your hand for it to be good. And even then, what are you doing? It's like late in the game, you are dealing like 8. These effects become much worse later in the game. That's what I have to say. And if the board is empty and you deal it all to their face, sure. But if you have a handful of cards and the board is empty, things are going pretty well for you anyway. So I don't see Meteorologist.
Yeah, it's like something that I remember you even mentioned to me. It's like, even if, let's say you had 9 cards in your hand, this is 9 damage. It's basically the equivalent of 2 Cinder Storms. But you 2 Cinder Storms and you get a 3/3 body, which 6-mana 3/3, not very good. I mean, the only advantage is the Meteorologist if it can like clear some of your opponent's minions. Yeah. But like you say, by the time you play a turn 6 in a mage, how many cards do you realistically have in your hand?
Yeah, I mean
Not more than 5, 6 at most a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean that's a pie in the sky dream. The only time, I thought of it. The only time I think this would be good is in that minion mage deck with Luna's Pocket Galaxy, Archmage Arugula, and Book of Spectres, where you can actually draw a ton of your minions and you can play Meteorologist for 1 mana. Then it's good. Otherwise, I'm not convinced.
Yeah,
and I mean that's a pretty like.
When you say, that's what I'm saying. When you're saying, "Oh, I'll play the card if it were to cost 5 less."
Yeah, that's kind of telling you what I think of the card. That's the one place maybe in that deck it's okay. But yeah, I'm not convinced. Then we have Astral Rift. 2 mana, add 2 random minions to your hand. So I mean, this is a spell that could kind of go in that minion deck, although I don't really see why. This is a value card. I don't really see why you play it. Like you're not playing this in your big spell mages for value because it's a small spell. I just don't see the place for Astral Rift. Am I missing something? I mean, this is the first time we're really even discussing it.
It's a kind of value card. So like Arena, it's not. I don't think it might be bad, but like in Constructor, I don't think you ever want to be paying 2 mana to put 2 random minions. So like the problem with it is because like in even just in standard, if you think about the number of minions you can get, like I'm not like you'd have to do the stats, but a lot of the time it's going to be like really unplayable, like really bad.
Random minions are bad. That's the moral of the story. Random minions are bad.
I mean,
and I think Astral Rift is pretty bad. I mean, I don't think we need to spend too much time on it.
Yeah.
Then we have Research Project, the Mage Project, 2 mana. each player draws 2 cards common. This seems really good for combo decks. I mean, if we look at the quest mages of the past, they would have gladly played Research Project over Cold Light Oracle. Maybe a return for quest mage, although the biggest thing they lost was Ice Block, and that's not coming back. So maybe there's some other combo decks that can make use of this. Maybe even just burn decks. I mean, I think this is better than Arcane Intellect and a pure aggressive mage, right?
Yeah, I mean, although it's still a case of you spending the 2 mana, I mean, you help your opponent also dig for answers. So, like, I'm not sure if it's really that good in like a tempo deck, but like, it's definitely for me kind of it leans towards like slower control style decks where you're looking to like find combo pieces and to set up like an amazing combo.
Yeah, I mean combo decks, not control. And they've given us a few tools for maybe some combo possibilities with these spell damage +2. And I think like Luna's Pocket Galaxy, these kind of things are interesting. I think overall Mage is looking very interesting. I think it's a really difficult class to analyze right now. And it's not necessarily in the best place right now. Aggro Mage is not that good. It's serviceable. Like Big Spell Mage, it's kind of okay as a counter to certain things like Taunt Druid, but Taunt Druid's not really that popular right now anyway. Mage is, I think, one of the weaker classes right now, and they've given them a lot of weird stuff. Like, this is a lot of stuff that's very difficult to analyze. I think the kind of tempo mages might be getting a bit better. Other than that, it's very difficult to say, actually.
Yeah, so we'll have to see where Mage ends up, right?
Yeah. And then Paladin, so this is the class we were talking about, might be a little bit meta for Magnetic and Mechs, and that's because of the final card that we'll be getting to there. One little common. But starting off with the epics, we have Glowstone Technician, 6 mana, 3/4 epic minion with Battle Cry. Give all minions in your hand +2/+2. We thought hand buff was dead, thankfully, and it turns out it's not. I'm just no to this minion. My experience with hand buff is that it's bad, and I don't want a hand buff on turn 6.
Yeah.
If I didn't want to anti-tempo myself to play a 2 mana hand buff card, I don't want to anti-tempo myself to play a 6 mana.
Because the worst part is that for it to get value, it means you're not playing the minions before then, right?
Exactly.
Like it kind of becomes a bit of like, if you play this in a deck that relies on hand buff, you want to ideally play cards early on, but then how many minions are actually getting buffed by that time?
Yeah,
and 6 mana 3/4, not good.
No, I just don't see the hand buff mechanic. I don't like it. We'll discuss it a little bit more later, but this is just bad. I don't like it. Yeah. Prismatic Lens, Paladin spell, 4 mana epic. Draw a minion and a spell from your deck. Swap their costs. This card really got us thinking about ways to swap costs. I mean, ultimately at its worst, it's 4 mana, draw 2 cards. At its best, you get a really cheap Lay on Hands or like a really cheap Lich King or Tyrion or something. I'm just not sure what how you build your deck to make the best use of that swapping part, but I really love the card's design.
Yeah, so it's one of those cases where you either try to go for the plan of you play a whole bunch of cheap, like crappy, like let's say cheap minions and expensive spells. So like you say, so you can get that 1 mana or 2 mana Avenging Wrath or Loud. Yeah. Or you go the other way and you play, let's say, a bunch of secrets and cheap spells and and some top heavy minions so that you can get like, let's say, a cheap Ysera or a cheap Deathwing or whatever it is.
Yeah, I must say I'm glad this card is even. I think it would have actually been really good in Odd Paladin if you're able to get a cheap level up. I mean, that would have been pretty scary because you have a lot of 1 mana cost minions. So if you can get a cheap level up by swapping one of the 1 mana cost minions and a level up, you'll happily hold that 5 mana normally 1 cost minion in order to get the 1 mana level up. So
yeah, it would have been a bit silly.
I'm glad that isn't in that deck. And then moving on, we do have an odd cost card, Mechano Egg, 5 mana 0/5 mech with Death Rattle at summon a 8/8 Robosaur. That is, of course, a mech as well. The big problem I have with eggs need to happen early because that gives you more time to get the synergy. That gives you time to catch up from the anti-tempo of playing the egg. And even though this gives you more stats than something like Devil's Saw Egg, I would rather play Devil's Saw Egg. The only thing this has going for it is that it's a mech. Your opponents don't want to kill it. And maybe it sticks to the board for your magnetic stuff.
Not just that, but also it potentially curves into Sparking Steed is still a card, remember?
That's true, that's true.
So, playing this, if your opponent doesn't kill it, you get a 2/11 that, like, when it dies. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, like, all of these eggs, obviously the big weakness is obviously silence.
Yeah.
That's obviously the problem with these eggs is, like, if you play this and it's silenced, you spend 5 mana to play, like, a 0/5.
Yeah.
It does nothing.
Yeah.
Which is a bit sad.
Yeah. I mean, there are cards like Shrink Ray as well in this set that kind of synergize with it a bit,
That's true as well, yeah.
You can Shrink Ray, and because Shrink Ray isn't just health, like equality, you can actually trade the Meccano Egg off. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually true, yeah.
I mean, we saw a little bit of the synergy in the deck that Chucky was playing with Meatwagon. So maybe that's because Meatwagon's also a mech. It synergizes well with Magnetic. So maybe there's some possibilities here for Magnetic, but I'm not sold that mech eggs are the best targets for our magnetic stuff.
Sure.
And then finally, possibly the most exciting Paladin card to me, which is an odd thing to say, and that's Glowtron. I mean, the big thing we're talking about, once again, cheap mechs to curve with for Magnetic, and that is exactly what this is, a 1-mana 1/3 mech with Magnetic. So late game, we can use it to buff our minions, keep them alive. That's great. That's great use for a 1-mana 1/3. A 1-mana 1/3 buff in the late game is pretty good when you already have the board, or you're fighting for the board with your existing board. And in the early game, it just gives you a mech to curve into.
Playing this on turn 1, you're generally going to be perfectly happy. Most mech decks, it's a potential target for Magnetic. It also just allows you to contest the board, and it's basically the stereotypical 1-mana 1/3 that a lot of classes have gotten.
Yep, and it's class specific. It's a mech. I think it's pretty good. I think it'll be auto include in the Magnetic decks. And I think
Sure.
Kangor's Endless Army is looking a lot better now. I must say that that and Magnetic Paladin are looking a lot better now. So yeah, I'm thinking Paladin might make a bit of a comeback as that kind of Magnetic deck. It just needs
this
it
is
needs
definitely
a
the most exciting part.
yeah, weirdly, super weird thing to say. The 1-mana 1/3 common is the most exciting card, but I think that's the one that really facilitates all the interesting stuff. With the mech synergy.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of weird, interesting cards in Paladin as well, like that seem to be pushing the kind of control Paladin. So it'll be interesting to see if that returns as well.
Yeah.
And then next up we have Priest. Priest, we have what's new for Priest? Extra arms, 3-mana spell, give a minion +2/+2, add more arms to your hand that gives them +2/+2. So it's just another spell that gives +2/+2. Not an extra copy of extra arms. It is not an infinite thing. Basically, you're playing a 3-mana 2/2 buff that draws you another 3-mana 2/2 buff. That's the short story for this. If Buff Priest is a thing, sure, this is decent value. I'm not convinced Buff Priest will be a thing. I don't really have much else to say about extra arms, and we can discuss it a little bit after test subject as well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously tried to go for like buff synergies.
Yeah.
Potentially combo Priest. Obviously, they're looking maybe to give extra tools.
Yeah. It feels like these are the buffs and the buff synergies that Paladin needed to make a Quest Paladin, I think. We have Test Subject. Test Subject's a 1-mana 0/2 Death Rattle minion. It has Death Rattle. Return any spells you cast on this minion to your hand. So immediately this isn't something that sticks out for your Death Rattle Quest Priest. This is something that sticks out with that Buff Priest, maybe Combo Priest, with cards like Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, Powered Shield. Powered Shield is probably one of the best ones that sticks out. Yeah, and Extra Arms as well as the Spellstone. Sorry, not the Spellstones, the Elixirs.
Yeah, and what the kind of interesting thing to note is by playing Extra Arms, you generate extra copies of Extra Arms. Because you played extra arms and more arms on Test Subject, you'll get extra arms and more arms returned to your hand, so then you can get more arms.
Yeah, so when you play extra arms for the second time, you'll get more arms, and then you'll have more arms and more arms in your hand.
Yeah, you'll have more arms.
Yes. So they are very, very repeatable buffs in that sense. But you have to kind of keep the board whilst you're playing these 3-mana 2/2 buffs, which is a tough ask, I feel. Honestly, like that's a big thing that sticks out to me.
Silence makes you very sad, right?
Yeah. Test subject very susceptible to silence, and I feel like that's something we've been saying a lot so far in these decks, these classes. I feel like Spellbreaker might be up for a nerf too, just because of how unfun silence is going to be after this expansion. But maybe Spellbreaker will also be the only thing keeping a lot of these crazy effects in check. And then finally we have Topsy Turvy. Topsy Turvy is a 0-mana spell. Swap a minion's attack and health. Obviously great for a kind of combo priest where you can just buff their health and you don't have to rely on Inner Fire. You can just Topsy Turvy it. Great flavor. I like the card.
Yeah, especially it's another card, especially in like when people were playing Skulking Geist to destroy your Inner Fires and your Power Shield. This like, and for a while, some people were playing Crazed Alchemists, but I think this is all around just generally better than Crazed Alchemist because
definitely
it doesn't cost 2 mana, and you were hardly ever playing like Crazed Alchemist because of the 2/2 body, right?
Yep.
You were playing it only for the battle cry.
Yeah, and in the scenarios where you want to have a cheap spell to activate your Wild Pyromancer, this works well. It actually synergizes really well with Wild Pyromancer himself because you swap his health to 3, which allows you to get more procs off, I think. I think this effect will happen first. Or even if the effect doesn't happen first. If Pyromancer's... Does Pyro's effect happen first? That's usually how it works.
Pyro's happen after, because Pyro happens after spells cast, right?
Okay, yes. Yeah. Then you can get basically the 1 extra proc from Wild Pyro. So, that helps a little bit with the board clears, and obviously it's also just a cheap thing that will allow the Paladin deck to kind of counter some tokeny aggressive strategies.
Which you mean the Priest?
Sorry, the Priest, yeah. Which will help it against, Druid and Paladin mostly,
It's a free spell, but it's a free card with Lyra edition.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's a...
Okay, so Priest overall, some interesting Death Rattle stuff. Probably going to help Quest Priest a little bit, but I'm mostly interested to see what other directions we can take Death Rattle Priest decks because I hate Quest Priest. I don't think it's particularly healthy for the game, mostly because of Benedictus and it just results in painful games. It is definitely something some people enjoy though, so I mean maybe some Combo Priest support. Anything else that sticks out to you?
Well, yeah, Combo Priest and Death Rattle. I mean, that's obviously and there's a potential other combo. Remember we talked with like the clothing, like with the cloning gallery. There's another potential.
Yeah, I feel like we've mentioned that about 4 expansions in a row, and it's struggled to materialize. I was getting excited about it with Vivid Nightmare last time, so we'll see. Like I'm excited for that, but also I'm tempering my excitement by it never works out like we want it to.
It never works out. Yeah.
I mean, maybe Xerx's cloning gallery is the final piece, but I'm not sure on that either.
Yeah.
Okay, and then moving on to Rogue, another class with Death Rattle theme, very much a theme of this expansion as a whole, actually. We have Necrium Vial, one of the new cards. Necrium Vial is a 5-mana epic spell. Trigger a friendly minion's Death Rattle twice. Obviously, you have Prep to help make it cheaper. You have Cube for some combos. There's a possibility if you play Leroy, Shadow Step it, and then the next turn you play the reduced Leroy. You cube the Leroy, you prep Necrium Vial, and you get 4 more Leroys on the board, so you've done 30 damage that turn.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean that's obviously the obvious combo. One of the combos. The problem is like other points of the game. When you're behind on board, Necrium Vial is trash. Even sometimes, if you don't get that scenario, you got to ask yourself, how often and how much is 5 mana to trigger Death Rattle twice? And like you need to be getting some pretty good effects for those. So like anything other than Cube doesn't seem particularly appealing.
Yeah, I mean Cube's really the thing that's sticking out for a lot of these Death Rattle decks. And I mean, maybe Necreon Vial sees play. I think it's Necreon Blade that's really exciting me. After thinking about it a lot more, I think that's actually probably much more powerful because you can upfront pay that mana cost to set up the Death Rattle triggering the turn you play the Death Rattle minion. I think that's actually pretty powerful. I mean, we look at how good cheap Death Rattle activators are. In like Warlock, it was Dark Pact because you could sack it immediately. That's like the extreme version of a Death Rattle activator, and then Play Dead and Hunter. So I actually think Necreon Blade might be good, and that might be more playable than Necreon Vial in those decks. Maybe we play one Necreon Vial in the Death Rattle Hunter decks, but I'm definitely gonna look at building one of those Death Rattle Rogue decks. Yeah. And then the other new cards we have Crazed Chemist. Crazed Chemist, a 5 mana 4/4 common minion with combo, give a friendly minion plus 4 attack. So basically with the cold blood on a stick.
Yeah, 5 mana 4/4. We still have Valspine in the meta, so
yeah, if I want to combo my 5 mana cost minions, I want to do it on Valspine.
But wait, isn't Cobalt Scalebane just better most of the time? 5 mana 5/5. It buffs. Okay, sure, the buff is only plus 3 attack.
Well,
but
and
it's repeatable.
Yeah,
it's repeatable and doesn't require combo.
But it's end of turn. That's the difference. Crazed Chemist will actually allow you to use that right now. And I mean, I think that's relevant maybe in like a Death Rattle deck. If you're playing eggs specifically, you can use it in that. Or actually, honestly, it's probably fine in Odd Rogue, right? Maybe. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you played over Scalebanes. I think the immediate damage might be better than Scalebane. I'm
thinking like the 5 mana 5/5 might be just better, right?
Sure, on curve it is. I mean, this is worse than Fungalmancer in those decks if you have more than one minion. But if you're behind on board or you have only one minion on the board, then Crazed Chemist becomes better. I do think Fungalmancer is a card I'd rather play over it. Valspine's a card I'd rather play over it in Odd Rogue. And there's a very limited number of 5-drops I want to play in Odd Rogue. So I'm not sure that makes the cut for that reason, really.
Yeah. And also you got to think about it, but turn 5, you can't, like, a 5 mana 4/4 does not seem to fight for the board very well.
I mean, it's the 4 attack that you have to like think about. It's 4 attack, it's permanent. And that's the real like interesting things. I mean, yeah.
But
I think you're underestimating Crazed Chemist, but I also don't think it's that good. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
Next up, we have Violet Haze. Violet Haze, 3 mana spell, add 2 random Death Rattle cards to your hand. No thank you. Random Death Rattle cards, probably worse than random legendaries. I don't want to spend 3 mana to do that. I don't care if I can prep it. I'm never prepping it. Go away. Stop with this Death Rattle stuff. We only want specific Death Rattles. If Death Rattle has taught them anything by now, it's that we want specific Death Rattles, not random Death Rattles. Like, I don't like this. I don't like Myra. Nah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, ultimately, it is essentially an arcade in, right? But for specific cards.
Mimic Pod. I'd 100% rather play Mimic Pod.
Sure.
I'd rather have 2 cards that are in my deck than Violet Haze. It's just not in my deck. Like, even in a Death Rattle deck, I'd rather play Mimic Pod.
Sure.
Yeah, so overall, I'm actually pretty excited, though, for Rogue. I think they've got some pretty decent class cards for a change. Mostly Necreon Blade and Lab Recruiter. The Pogo Hopper stuff's a bit of a meme. The Academic Espionage stuff, probably a bit of a meme. Maybe Necreon Vial is playable in those Death Rattle decks if they work. The rest, I'm a bit meh on. Myra's Unstable Element could be pretty good. But is something that's really, really difficult to analyze, like with a lot of rogue cards, to be honest. So it's something that we're going to have to play with to see how good it is. I think it could easily be underestimated and overestimated. So I really don't know where to estimate it.
Yeah, it's a very powerful effect, we've mentioned before. But yeah, it's...
Comes with a massive downside.
That's the thing.
I don't think it's like break the game. I think it's either pretty good or very bad. Like, I don't think it's break the game. I don't think it's Quest Rogue break the game powerful.
Okay, sure.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, Rogue not looking too bad. There's enough reason to play some new Rogue archetypes. That's the main thing I'm excited about. Necreon Blade. For that reason. And Lab Recruiter, there's some interesting potential for some more control rogues. Yeah, we'll see about that one.
Oh boy, control rogue. The good days.
And speaking about classes that are trying desperately to make control decks, we have Shaman. Shaman, we have Stormbringer, this is the legendary spell, 7 mana, transform your minions into random legendary minions. We've spoken about how bad legendary minions are. Do we have to say any more? I don't know.
Yeah, 7 like
I'd have to have a board of 1/1s to care to do this.
And then the worst part is there are so many bad legendary minions now.
Yeah.
Sure, if you get a board full of 10/10s, it's great.
Okay.
But like,
the only times this will see play are of Hagatha or Woecleaver. Okay, then there we go. We're done with Stormbringer. Next, Omega Mind. Yeah, we still have to cover that. Omega Mind, 2 mana, 2/3, epic minion, battle cry. If you have 10 mana crystals, your spells have lifesteal this turn. Sure, seems alright in some kind of control decks, and that's about all.
This does volcano. This does volcanoes.
Yeah, is it like something you can actually play and cut Healing Rain sometimes? But I'm not sure about that. I mean, yeah.
It has the benefit.
The problem of playing this plus Volcano is you put 3 more health on the board. So I actually don't think it works very well with Volcano. I think it's really Lightning Storm that you want to use with it.
Sure, yeah, Lightning Storm. So it's kind of a little bit like a mini Halazael in a way.
Yeah,
but
I feel like
it only happens once is also not that great.
Yeah, I feel like we would need one more kind of board clear spell to really convince me to play Omega Mind over just playing Healing Rain right now.
Sure.
Because Healing Rain also has the versatility of sometimes healing your minions when that's relevant. Like, we've seen that be relevant enough times in Shadowwalk Shaman that I'm kind of rather want to play that. And you can use it earlier in the game, which is probably when you want that heal more than having to wait until turn 10. Then we have Elementary Reaction, 2 mana card. 2 mana spell, draw a card, copy it if you played an elemental last turn. I absolutely love this card's pun, and I like the card's design. I think it's pretty interesting. Adding a spell with the whole elemental matters mechanic is pretty good, and it's a pretty good card for elemental decks, maybe even Shaman.
Helps with the value a lot.
Yeah, if you play like a even Shaman elemental deck, I mean, this is better to me than something like Menacing Nimbus, in a way. Even though you don't get the board that turn, you are getting 2 cards from your deck, which is probably better than a random elemental. I don't know. It's actually a difficult comparison, but it does convince me maybe we could play even elemental Shaman, maybe.
Ooh, okay.
Maybe. And then, speaking of even cards, we have Beaked Lightning. Beaked Lightning is a 0 mana. Yes, that's even. Spell, common, deal 1 damage to all minions. Overload 2. This is the second coming of Maelstrom Portal, in a way, because you can develop a minion. Yeah. You can develop a minion the same turn you play it. You just have to have that minion instead of getting the 1 cost minion for free. And it does deal it to your side of the board, which is not always a positive. But it can be
like Whirlwind, really.
Yeah, it can be in maybe like Shadowwalk Shamans where you're playing Acolyte of Pain. And of course, this also sticks out as a card for the possible Overload Shamans. It has a very weird synergy with Thunderhead, which is after you play a card with Overload, summon 2 1/1 Sparks with Rush. I'm not actually sure if the Sparks die. I'm not sure what the ordering is there. If you play Thunderhead plus the Lightning, I would imagine the Sparks come after the Lightning is dealt, because it does say after you play a card with Overload. So I would imagine the Overload happens first. Well, the spell, with the Overload happens first. So that's actually pretty decent synergy if you also have Zap, and there's a couple cheap spells. Maybe this even works with Omega Mind. As that extra kind of life gain. It's kind of making a Spirit Lash.
Sure. I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, overall for Shaman, how are you feeling?
I don't know. I think they definitely try to push elemental shaman like a lot more than previously. So like a more mid-rangey, some like quite a few of those like four, like the 3-5 seem like they have quite a bit of potential.
Yeah.
With the rush dudes.
Yeah, I think the big issue for me is right now it's pretty much even Shaman and Shadowwalk Shaman. Even Shaman fights to the board really well, and that's really good because it seems like that's going to be important. I mean, a lot of these decks, a lot of these classes seeming like they're trying to build board-based decks, and we're having a lot more, early game kind of snowball type cards, I think, in this expansion. That seems to be the direction mechs tend to go. And I think that's good for even Shaman, but pretty bad for Shadowwalk Shaman. The decks it's trying to counter are the really slow decks. A lot of these decks are not looking like that. They're looking like they want to be more aggressive. So not really good news for Shadowwalk Shaman, but that might make a lot of people happy anyway. And the Elemental Shaman, I'm pretty unsure of, to be honest.
Yeah, it's something that's been it's like been very fringy for quite a while. I think.
Yeah, I'm just
not many people have done a good enough data analysis on it though.
I'm just not sure it's better than even Shaman. That's the key point to me. I mean, because a lot of the really good Shaman spells are even, and there's more cards now to facilitate a specific elemental synergy, even Shaman. So we might just see that becoming the elemental Shaman. And then we have Warlock, almost finally. Warlock, we have two new legendary cards. Dr. Morrigan, the legendary scientist. 8 mana, 5/5, Death Rattle. Swap this with a minion from your deck. I mean, people compare it to like Madame Goya or Possessed Lackey, but it's 8 mana, 5/5 that does nothing, and no. I mean, that's kind of what I have to say. I don't like Morrigan. We'll see when we're building decks if we can find a way to make her work, but right now, no. More interestingly, the Solarium. This is the legendary spell. It is 1 mana. Draw 3 cards at the end of your turn. Discard them. Seems pretty powerful. It's a great top deck in the late game for Zoo. I'm not 100% sure if you want to always play it in Zoo versus just playing extra minions and extra 1-drops to increase the percentage chance you actually get to play a 1-drop on 1, which is always pretty important for Zoo. Zoo is obviously the deck where you're most likely to be able to play the 3 cards. But, there's always good old Quest Warlock.
Quest Warlock. You think that they're trying to make that thing again?
I don't know.
I don't know. Like, it doesn't look like they've given it really enough support. We don't. I mean, it's not like previous where we've had what is that card now? My brain just shut down.
How many cards do you have to discard for the quest? I haven't played.
6?
I think
it's 6.
Okay. I mean, Solarium gets you halfway there. I mean, we're not seeing a lot of discard synergy. There's no Silverware Golems, right? I mean, Clutch Mother Zavas is the one that you want to discard that kind of has a benefit.
What's another one? There's that. I can't think of it now.
Well, there's the Cobalt, the 6 mana 5/5 that Death Rattle can bring back a card you discarded. Yeah.
Okay,
that one.
Might be that one. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Ectomancy. Ectomancy is 6 mana spell. Summon copies of all demons you control. Seems disgusting in Cube Warlock, possibly. If your demons stick around. Not sure that is. That feels a little win more. I mean, in a world where your Void Lords stick around, it is very powerful, though. Arguably better than Cube. Seems pretty ridiculous with Skull of the Minari, too. I mean, you're just putting more copies of the demons in your deck for in the death pool for Blood Reaver Gul'dan, so I don't know. Any thoughts on Ectomancy?
I just think it's a very win more card. Like the scenarios in which you're playing when you're doing it, I feel like you were probably already winning it, and obviously when you're behind, it's absolute trash. Obviously, so it's quite. Not so. I think it'll be one of those cases where even though Blizzard have tried to make a card, you might play Demon Zoo or Demon Warlock without that card still, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it as a zoo card. I see it as specifically it needs to be a combo card, really. Yeah. Anyway, I think it actually does have pretty decent potential, but I'm not convinced that it's necessarily that good. Okay, moving on to some other cards for a more Demon Zoo-ish deck. Let's talk about Soul Infusion first, because there's a bunch of cards related to this. So, I mean, hand buffing was always kind of a paladin, hunter, and warrior thing back in Mean Streets of Gadget Sand, but we have some hand buffy type stuff happening here in Warlock too. Soul Infusion, a 1-mana rare spell. Give the leftmost minion in your hand +2/+2. So something similar to Stargazer Luna. We're seeing them play with the hand positioning of minions or hand positioning of cards. I like this. I like that part of the design of the card. Not such a fan of the spending 1 mana to do nothing, but it's cheap enough that you can play that minion, but then you're playing a minion and spending 1 mana to buff it to 2. That's not very good either. Like, if it was just a card that said 1 mana, give a minion +2/+2, I'd be arguably skeptical on playing that. So, yeah, I'm not that convinced to play Soul Infusion as a result.
Yeah, I mean, there is some of the synergies which we're going to get to. You know, like we already spoke, I think, previously about Omega Agent.
Yeah.
And now there's another Warlock Demon.
Yeah, doubling imp.
Synergizes with it.
Yeah,
but yeah, like you said, I like the design. So
yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about Doubling Imp then. Doubling Imp, 3 mana, 2/2 demon, common, battle cry, summon a copy of this minion. I like this, 3 mana, 4/4 stats. Works really well with Prince Keleseth and Zoo. And obviously it works well with Soul Infusion too. I actually think this card is pretty solid. More bodies for your Zoo deck. Their 3-drops are honestly a bit weak at the moment. They're playing all that Happy Ghoul stuff, and I think Doubling Imp might just be better than the Happy Ghoul stuff. Except when the Happy Ghoul stuff goes off, which I think you might just be able to build a more consistent Zoo deck with something like Doubling Imp.
Yeah, it is a bit of value though. So I mean, on the bright side, it does, even if without Keleseth, it does set up for, let's say, turn 4 Defender if you want.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
that is potential there.
Yeah, and then we have Void Analyst. This is a card that's meant to synergize with something like Doubling Imp. 2 mana, 2/2 demon. Death Rattle, give all demons in your hand +1/+1. So obviously you can get 3/3/3s with your Doubling Imp. You can buff any other demons. I'm not sure this card alone is enough to force Keleseth out of my Zoo decks, but if there's enough other solid 2-drops that I want to play this and those in my Zoo decks, then it is definitely pretty decent if we can find enough demons to buff.
Yeah, and it probably will get better as the expansions come on.
Yeah, that's true. And then speaking of demons, we have Nether Soul Buster. Nether Soul Buster is a 3 mana 1/5 demon with Battle Cry, gain +1 attack for each damage your hero has taken this turn. There's some specific synergy cards we'll see coming up. So far, I've been pretty unimpressed with these cards because you have to spend mana in some way dealing damage to yourself most of the time. You can't play this on curve, so you can't play some broken 3 mana 3/5, 4/5, 5/5 minion, right? Like, yes, it's 3 mana, but you're playing it on turn 4, turn 5, or on. So, I mean, the best uses are something like Flame Imp plus Nether Soul Buster, but I'd rather always play my Flame Imp on turn 1. I mean,
yeah, also, Flame Imp turn 1 is.
Yeah. But it is another demon to be buffed by Void Analyst. So honestly, if Void Analyst just trades and you get a 3 mana 2/6 in Zoo, that's probably fine.
Yeah.
And then we have Spirit Bomb. Spirit Bomb's a 2 mana Warlock spell, deal 4 damage to a minion and your hero. A pretty nice kind of tempo spell that gives you that kind of trade-off. Synergizes with things like Nether Soul Buster, as well as some other kind of Zoo-ish cards they've printed before, like the Dusk Bat. So maybe we could see a more like damage yourself Zoo, and Spirit Bomb is actually pretty useful to have a tempo tool that you can use when you're behind on board as Zoo.
Yeah.
And it is, of course, something that might be playable in control decks too. I mean, even Shaman or even some of the Cube Warlocks, so that they have other activators for the Spellstone. That whole damage yourself thing definitely seems to be something they're pushing, and I think it's pretty interesting and noticeable that all the demons they printed were kind of cheap demons to not make Blood Reaver Gul'dan too silly, and to kind of make to not kind of buff anything like Q block, right? I mean that's the key thing here. Is they're printing cheap demons, so they're trying to push the zoo side a little bit more. So I think things are looking good for Warlock.
Yeah. Although, yeah, I mean, we'll see if the hand buff becomes a deck or if it just basically becomes a new hybrid of Zoo.
I think it's just a zoo deck. I don't want to play Soul Infusion really, because that's a card I have to put in my deck, and I don't like putting it in my deck. But we'll put it in our deck and try and see. I'd rather just play Killer Seth for my Doubling Imp or Void Analyst to set up my Doubling Imps. Yeah. And finally, in terms of classes, we have Warrior, Pandemonia's favorite one here, so I'm sure he's going to have lots to say. We don't have a lot of new cards, though. We have Dynomatic. Do you want to tell the users about, or the listeners, sorry, about Dynomatic?
So, Dynomatic is a 5-mana 3/4 rare mech with Battlecry. Deal 5 damage, randomly splits among all minions except mechs. So, the cards that kind of come to mind in terms of like remembering it are Goblin Blast Mage, which was a mech rare. I mean, which was a mage rare from Goblins and Gnomes, and also Mad Bomber. But the advantage of this is if you play the mech deck, it won't deal any damage to your own stuff.
Yep.
As well as not do damage to face. So it's obviously it is a target for like something like Magnetic, but 5 damage, splits 3/4, not so sure.
Yeah, it's definitely something that helps control the board a lot, and helps you come back onto the board with the mech deck, which I think is pretty important, especially pre-Dr. Boom, when your mechs will actually have Rush. It's a little bit of an underwhelming body, and that's something we've seen from a lot of these mechs in Warrior. So, I mean, I don't think, bar the 1-mana 1/3 we've spoken about before, I don't think their class mechs look particularly interesting. This is probably the most interesting of them. And you do have to play a deck that is very, very mech heavy to make this work, because you don't want to be hitting your own minions unless there's something like Acolyte of Pain. And that's there are Warriors cards that synergize with taking damage, so there's that option. And then we have Weapons Project. Weapons Project 2-mana spell. Each player equips a 2/3 weapon and gains 6 armor. So, symmetrical weapon effects here, giving your opponent the weapon as well as the armor. That's quite interesting. I mean, you do get the first use of it.
Yeah, and the thing is, in generally the matchups that you want this, giving your opponent 6 armor is negligible, basically. You don't care. So, I think it's quite a good resource, for, just to contest the board.
Yeah, I mean, against something like Zoo, for instance, even though you give them a weapon, which they wouldn't usually have, they're going to spend probably all of that going face, and then they've basically just cancelled out the 6 armor you gained, and you basically paid 2 mana for a 2/3 weapon that gives them 6 armor.
It's
which,
not
as you said,
War Axe, but,
it's not Fiery War Axe, but it does seem okay. I think it does definitely have potential. I'm not just... It is kind of meta dependent. It is also a way to destroy weapons like Skull of the Minari, and even something like the Twig of the World Tree to destroy them, because you're giving your opponent a weapon which will override their weapon. So that's another nifty little cool thing it does. Yeah.
Trick. Yeah.
Then we have Rocket Boots. Rocket Boots, a 2-mana spell. Give a minion rush, draw a card. Warrior, that's the rush class, the most rushy class, which is ironic, right? When it went from being one of the slowest control classes in the beginning of Hearthstone to now the most rushy class possible. And that's largely just because they're giving it stuff to make up for its hero power being so anti-tempo. I mean, I still think that's the design philosophy here. So 2 mana to basically give one of your minions rush. I mean, that means it's only good when you play the minion that turn. You're playing this in a mech deck? You're playing this before turn 7, or if you haven't drawn or played your boom, maybe you can play it. And I don't know, 2 mana to give a minion rush. I'm not sold. Drawing the card isn't enough to make me
there's
like it.
there's no OCK combo where you need to draw a lot of cards.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's just a cantrip in the sense that it replaces itself, I'm not that excited about. Yeah, I don't see the good synergy with it. That's the big thing for me.
yeah.
So overall, warrior. I mean, they're getting the hero power. The hero card. That's very powerful. Not to be underestimated. I think that could definitely have a change in their fates. They get the Eternium Rover once again, the 1 mana 1/3 mech. I'm excited about to facilitate the mech deck. The rest of the cards seem pretty meh.
Well, the boom ship is still, I think, pretty good.
Yeah,
But, make
Boomship
control,
has potential.
Make control warrior great again, right?
I mean, it's for Recruit Warrior, though, which is not really a Control Warrior deck, if you think about it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, it does have some potential in those kind of decks. So, Warrior has a little bit potential. I still feel like it's the weakest mech deck, even though it got the hero card that's related to mechs. Maybe Boom can carry it in terms of mechs, but I'm not sure about that. And then finally, neutrals. So we're going to go through this kind of stuff quickly because there's a lot. So we're just going to highlight some of the interesting cards that are worth talking about. Firstly, Mechathune. Lots of people making noise about Mechathune. I think it is a great card in terms of design. It's great. It gets people talking about the game. It gets people that are not that involved in all the card reveals and stuff talking about it. Alternate win conditions are great. This will not happen. This is not reliable. There's a lot of the combos people propose. They're not great. The best one is Druid, playing it, innovating, naturalize. You have to have no more cards in hand. You have to have drawn your whole deck, played it. The only way you do that, Ultimate Infestation. You have to play both Ultimate Infestations and not kill yourself with fatigue. That sounds like a terrible plan that's not happening.
Yeah, and usually like the problem with these kind of with the alternate win condition is, let's say like you want to outlast aggro, is generally by the time you've run, let's say, an aggressive deck out of resources, You're already winning. You don't actually need the Mechathune. If you reach your fatigue, you've won, basically.
By the time you've got to no resources in your deck, and no cards in your hand, there's a decent chance your opponent is also in that scenario, unless you've played something like Hemet to burn half your deck. That's the brief potentials, right? Hemet, and then you play Mechathune, and then you play Cataclysm, but they have to not interact with your Mechathune. Like, if they interact with your Mechathune when you have that Cataclysm in hand, the game's over, because you have a Cataclysm and no cards. So
very sad. Silence, transform, it makes you very sad.
Yeah, and I mean, we're saying silence is going to be a good thing. No. I mean, sure, it's like a target for Magnetic, but I'm sure there's better targets to play than Mechathune. But I like the design in terms of extra things. It's a meme. It's a worse meme than Togwaggle. Togwaggle was more viable than this. That's what I have to say about it.
Somehow they get it right or wrong.
I mean, it's the Togwaggle of this set, except it's worse than Togwaggle.
Yeah.
And then Subject 9, 5 mana, 4/4, Battle Cry, draw 5 different secrets from your deck. I see what they did here and why it's called Subject 9. Because, there's 2 5s, 2 4s, the 5 plus the 4, that equals 9. And then you get 2 9s. I don't know. There's 9s. If you do maths, you get 9. You can also get other numbers, but you can also get 9. 5 mana, 4/4 that draws 5 secrets from your deck. In Paladin, I mean, how do you feel about drawing 5 1 mana secrets?
I have to run those secrets in my deck. No thanks.
Yep, that's a good.
This is.
I mean, that's enough.
Discussion with.
It's no mysterious challenge. It's not putting them on the board. I think
exactly.
That's the important part here. I don't think that's the way to use secrets in Paladin, which I don't think Secret Paladin is impossible, but that Subject 9 is not one of the ways that's going to happen. Hunter, I mean, you get the Beast and you get 2 mana secrets. How do you feel about that?
Well, Hunter traditionally struggles with drawing cards, so I don't mind it in Hunter. Because also most of the secrets are playable. I mean, Freezing Trap, Explosive Trap, Wandering Monster, Snipe is. Oh no, Snipe still standard? It is.
Yes, yeah, it's classic.
Yeah, Snipe. Has applications. So I feel like most of your secrets are live. Are actually used for live.
I mean, most of the time you're not drawing 5, but that's okay. 5 mana, draw 3 cards, filter those out of your next possible draws is not so bad. It is a card you will get offered off Deathstalk or Rexar sometimes because it's a 5 mana or less beast. And that might be relevant for those decks that play both Deathstalk or Rexar and Secrets. Otherwise, it's just a bad beast to get. So in that way, a bit of a nerf. So Deathstalk Rexar. And then in Mage, drawing 3 mana Secrets, those are too expensive. I don't want to play them. There's no ice block for me to fish anymore. I don't like it. That's Mage, basically. Yeah. So I'm not so sure on Subject 9. At best, probably a Hunter card. Harbinger, and Rogue. I mean, unless you can pull off specific combos with Rogue, I'm not convinced. I haven't actually thought about Rogue that much. Maybe Cheat Death is worth it, but I don't think so. Harbinger Celestia, 4 mana, 5/6 with stealth. Wow, that's amazing. It's also a legendary. But after your opponent plays a minion, it becomes a copy of it. So they play their
stats.
Yeah, it doesn't retain their stat. It doesn't retain its own stats. So they play a 1/1, it becomes a 1/1, and then it's a 1/1 forever. It's not going to change again, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that's how it works because it changes its state on the board. Yeah. Or it would say something along those lines. So sure, you get a 4 mana 5/6. It has stealth. They can't interact with it with spells, but they can also just play their worst minion. So only against decks where they don't have bad minions is this good.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the worst thing that can happen is like Doomsday, right?
Yeah, you already have a board. You play Harbinger Celestia. They play Doomsday, or they just ignore your Celestia, take a bit of damage, let you develop again, and then play Doomsday. So yeah. I mean, I'm just not sure the upside is worth the downside of how bad it can be. That's the big thing to me.
Definitely.
Then we have Holomancer. That's pretty bad. I actually don't even think we want to talk about it. Okay. Any other specific minions you want to talk about? Let's have a look. EMP Operative, LOL, the mech crab that we kind of discussed. 5 mana, 3/3 Battlecry, destroy a mech. Worse than all the crabs, except that the mechs, if magnetic is a thing, will be bigger. That's the only argument I can give for why it's different.
Then you got a bunch of
they changed the art for a Mega Defender, I see. That makes more sense now, yeah. New art makes much more sense. It doesn't look like it actually should be a mech. Anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, there's some neutral beasts that affect Deathstalk or Rexar. I think that's what you're going to say, like Augmented Elec.
No, I was going to say there were neutral mechs.
Oh, yeah.
So like cards like the what was I going to say? The Skaterbot.
Skaterbot, yeah. Okay, I think we'll get to that in a sec.
Right.
I mean, I'm just going down the list here in terms of rarity. I mean, there's nothing else to discuss really in the epics. Loose Specimen, maybe in Cube Hunters, 5 mana, 6/6 beast. Destroys 6. Battlecry deals 6 damage, randomly split amongst friendly minions. So maybe to activate eggs and stuff, but eggs are better activated when they stay on the board. But yeah, Crystallizer, as you mentioned. 1 mana, 1/3 epic minion, Battlecry, deal 5 damage to your hero, gain 5 armor. Synergy with the self-damaging or the cards that want you to deal damage to yourself in Warlock. And obviously as well, synergy with classes that care about armor. So mostly Warrior and...
Druid for the Spellstone, basically.
Yeah, what's the other class that cares about armor now? I forgot, other than Druid and Warrior. Is there any other class that cares?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, armor is always better to have. I mean, arguably, it's okay for priest because you're just going to heal back the thing. So you'd rather change health for armor if you're playing it on turn 1 anyway. But you'd also rather play Nullshire Cleric on turn 1. So I'm not sure it really works for priest. But yeah.
I mean, it's a solid 1-drop though.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a different alternative to something like Diamol. I was going to say Bearmol.
Close.
Okay, and then if we're now looking through the rares, I still think Giggling Inventor is looking like one of the strongest there. There's Unpowered Mauler, I think, which is kind of interesting. 2 mana 2/4 mech. Can only attack if you cast a spell this turn. I mean, I don't really know what decks that's going to work in, but it is a very good power mech. It's a pity if you magnetic it, you're not going to override that part of the ability. If you could with magnetic, it would be powerful.
So, are you saying? No,
What?
sorry, my brain is just wandering.
Okay, then Spark Engine. I mean, we're talking about cheap mechs here. Those are really the things that stick out to us, as you were mentioning, amongst the neutrals. Spark Engine, 2-mana, 2/1 mech with Battle Cry at a 1/1 Spark with Rush to your hand. Seems pretty understated, but it's not going to stick around on the board for your magnetic stuff, which is what you're really hoping for.
Spark with Rush might, you can combo that with magnetic, which I think will be quite handy.
The 1/1 Spark
are mechs.
No, aren't they elementals? Because we have the elemental sparks.
Oh, right. Sure. I thought they might.
No, I'm fairly sure they're elementals. Let me have a look quickly, but I'm fairly sure these are elementals.
Sure. Yeah, there's obviously, okay.
Yeah, it looks like they are elementals. And then, obviously, our favorite card, Steel Rager. Steel Rager is a 4-mana 5/1. So more expensive than Magma Rager, which means Magma Rager is better. That's all. We don't have to talk about it anymore. Magma Rager is the best card. Moving on. Okay, no. Steel Rager has Rush and is a mech.
It's not actually playable as... Not serious. Like, it might actually not be that bad. But
it's a 4-mana 5/1 spell that deals damage without dealing it through Taunt. I mean, that's kind of what it does. Maybe it sees some play. Seems pretty good in Arena, but once again, we're not Arena experts.
Yeah.
And then one of the cards that I think everyone kept comparing every mech, especially if it had Death Rattle, to Piloted Shredder. And now we have a card that is actually comparable to Piloted Shredder, almost like a balanced Piloted Shredder, Piloted Reaper. Piloted Reaper, I mean, this is 100% like an homage to Piloted Shredder, right? There's no way it isn't.
Sure, yeah.
4-mana, 4/3 mech with Death Rattle. I mean, how could you be more Piloted Shredder? Summon a random minion from your hand that costs 2 or less. So, once again, it summons a minion that costs 2 this time it's 2 or less. It costs 2 when it dies. The only caveat this time is it has to be in your hand. So you're not getting extra cards from nowhere. You have to still be holding 2 or less cost minion in your hand, which, if you're curving out, isn't something you really want to be doing. But maybe for some kind of decks, you can get away with it. Maybe in Zoo, where you have an abundance of cheap minions.
Yeah, but they obviously...
I mean, in Zoo, then you're playing Piloted Reaper instead of probably other more powerful 4-drops you could play. So,
yeah, I mean, honestly, it looks really cool, but obviously it's not as strong as the old Piloted Shredder. But this might still see some
you can
play.
Still get Millhouse Mana Storm out of it, and you probably won't get Doomsayer.
But you also have to run it in your deck, though.
Yeah. It's not a good reason to play Millhouse, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, sure.
And then, I mean, really the other interesting mechs are kind of the cheaper ones that allow you to help smooth out your curve. And we saw Bronze Gatekeeper on the stream, 3-mana 1/5 mech with Magnetic and Taunt. So it's a cheap way to give Taunt to your other mechs, which synergizes well, especially with some of the warrior mechs. And it also, by itself, it's a decent body to possibly survive for other magnetic minions as a target. Then, I mean, the other ones you talked about, Skaterbot, obviously, 1-mana, 1/1 mech with Magnetic and Rush, and it comes with a free Avril Lavigne reference as well.
Yeah. And I think the other one. Did we talk about Coppertail Imposter?
No, Coppertail Imposter, yeah, that's another good one to point out. 4-mana 4/4 mech with Battle Cry, gains stealth until your next turn.
So it's a good magnetic target as well, and just being semi-decent stats. And yeah, the stealth I think quite handy. I mean, we don't see. I mean, 4/4 stealth. We don't. The only other one. I mean, what 5/5 stealth is?
Yeah, the closest Stranglethorn Tiger.
Like with the Tiger, there's a 3-mana 4/2. So this is, somewhere in between there, basically.
Yeah, and it gives you a better chance at having your minions survive so that you can magnetic onto it. Obviously, 4 health does die to a few AoEs, like Flame Strike and stuff like that, and it's easier to clear with the file and things like that, but ultimately, it's maybe not too bad.
I think a lot of these are like the staple. They'll give me the staples of the...
Yeah,
the other one...
The cards that are going to kind of define whether mech decks are a thing.
Is we alluded to it a bit earlier, is Mecharoo.
Yeah. Basically a card... It's basically a card we exactly said. I think on the previous Magma Rages episode, they need to print this exact card for me to consider magnetic. And they have. I mean, basically, we should be Blizzard game designers. Blizzard, please hire us. Or at least me. I at least studied game design. I mean, he can make some chemicals. And we could have made lots of science jokes, at least, for the... Anyway. Yeah. Okay, you want to tell everyone what Mecharoo is? Yeah.
It's a 1/1 common mech. With Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Joe-E bot. So obviously it's a play on kangaroos. And I'm assuming, that the bot is also obviously a mech. Yeah. So basically a mech that Death Rattle summons another 1/1 mech. It's possessed villager, but like a mech. And so this card potentially makes the Hunter Fireworks tech, I think it's called. The one that says give a friendly mech +1/+1 and trigger Death Rattle. It makes that card potentially a decent curve.
Yeah, or even the 2-mana 2/2/1 with magnetic and poisonous. The poisonous isn't necessarily always that important, but you can trade. You can trade up a lot of the time if you're up against like 2/3s. And that's pretty good. Otherwise, I mean, this is just a cheap mech that can combine with even something like Skaterbot on turn 2. You can deal 2 damage and leave behind a 2/1. Trade it in.
Like the kangaroo can really jump, so it doesn't really need skate though, right?
Yeah, but if it skates, then it can rush, and then it can get to its target faster to jump on it. I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, a kangaroo on a skateboard. Don't you like the idea of that? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, because that just makes so much sense. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not just any normal skateboard. You got to bear in mind, Skaterbot's skateboard has rockets on it, so that's pretty important.
It's a cool skateboard. Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, not good for tricks, good for going downhill very fast, which makes sense for the rush mechanic.
Sure.
Then there's a couple other interesting ones around here. I think Toxicologist. I mean, 2-mana 2/2 with Battle Cry, give your weapon 1 attack. May be okay in some decks. I'm struggling to see where outside of Rogue you actually can make good use of the weapon buff, but
and it's a strictly worse Goblin Auto Barber. It was a Rogue card a while.
Yeah, but I think it's something that is relatively interesting. As well as Cloakscale Chemist, 2-mana 1/2 with Stealth and Divine Shield. Interesting combination of keywords to have on a 2-mana 1/2. I think there's some interesting potential in some of these cheap ones. Even Electro, right? Which is a 3-mana 3/3 with Battle Cry. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, gain +1/+1.
So now you can keep Ultimate Infestation in your opening hand.
And your Spiteful Druid, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Electrolyte, it can be a very powerful 3-drop. So I think there's some interesting cheap mechs and cheap minions in the neutrals. And for Arena, they've printed a lot more 2-drops than they usually print. So that's also pretty relevant. And that's across classes as well as across the neutrals. So overall, I mean, it's looking like a bit of a faster meta. But we're going to have to start building some decks, and then we'll have a real good idea where we think which cards can actually fit in. Because it's once you start refining cards down to that, final 30 cards that has to go in a deck that you really start getting strict with. Actually, this card's probably not good enough, right?
Yeah, or we just don't need it, or we're really enough of that effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Or there's not enough support yet for something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to see us doing that, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We will be doing videos over the coming days and the weekend before the expansion comes out, so you can be as best prepared as possible for the expansion. We'll actually be having full card ratings for all these cards, so you can make fun of us later when we say they're trash and give them 1-star ratings, and then they are super broken. But most importantly, I think just actually having deck lists and having those as a tool to discuss is super important and super useful. So we're going to go back, do lots of research, build some decks, and see what we can come up with. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. This has obviously been a really long episode, and thanks for staying awake, Pandemonia. If you want to reach out to Pandemonia on Twitter, you can find him at PandemoniaZA. It's down below him there. And if you want to find myself, you can find me at dib_gaming. It's over there. And you can also comment on the YouTube videos if you have anything specific you want to say about any of the cards now. You can also subscribe and just share the videos as much as possible. Any support's really appreciated. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone, and have a great Boomsday.